Welcome to the Dr. Eric K. Coleman Show. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and click the notifications tab to stay abreast with all content pertaining to this platform. You can follow me on Instagram at Dr. Eric K. Coleman, Facebook, Dr. Eric Coleman, and contact me at Dr. Eric K. Coleman, all one word, at gmail.com to book one-on-one sessions, speaking engagements, and submit inquiries, questions, and episode content suggestions. Let's get right into it. Today's topic is all about healthy relationships. We will be unpacking a TED Talk by Joanne Davila concerning how to select, cultivate, and sustain healthy relationships in conjunction with a few of the chapters in my book Paradigm, Expectations, and Being in Love with the idea of relationships, but not the person you are in relationship with. There is a overall arching theme here that she will be dealing with in this clip called romantic competency. I'm going to say that again. It's called romantic competency. And with those three buckets of romantic competency, she is going to be dealing with insight, mutuality, and emotional regulation. So let's go ahead and jump into the clip for today.
Intimacy, security, respect, good communication, a sense of being valued. These are some of the things that most people would agree make for healthy relationships. And researchers would agree too. There's a large body of literature on romantic relationships that's identified the features of healthy relationships, and the list I just provided contains many of them. Researchers also agree on what makes for unhealthy relationships. Things like fighting so much that you just can't work things out, not being able to go to your partner for support when you need it, contempt, criticism, hostility, violence. When these problems happen in relationships, they can cause significant unhappiness. They can lead to the end of relationships and divorce, and they can literally make people physically and emotionally sick.
What I truly appreciate here, as Joanne opens up her dialogue, um, as I want to reiterate about what this platform is meant for, not necessarily just to go off of emotions and self perceptions and speculations, but as we will see in this clip, as she just pointed out, that the information that she is going to present here is rooted in empirical evidence and data, existing body of knowledge, literature, and research. So again, we want to make sure that uh, all viewers on this platform are well educated from a standpoint not just of lived experiences and suggestions and perspectives, but also from bringing information from existing body of knowledge that has actually been researched and that people can tap into and can actually use these things in real world and practical ways. And the first statement that she just mentioned here about healthy relationships is we have to make sure that we are engaged in relationships that are healthy, because if we are not, they can literally make us physically and emotionally sick.
This is why it's so critical that people have healthy relationships. But there's a problem. How many people know, really know what to do on a day-to-day basis to create healthy relationships? My point is this: we may know what a healthy relationship looks like, but most people have no idea how to get one, and no one teaches us how to do so.
So, with that question being posed, we can ask that question of ourselves here. And that's going back to the very first episode of the show. And the crux of this platform is being taught how to think differently about relationships. From the beginning, what life experiences, what cultivations, what life practicalities or models did we have as we were growing up from our parents, our grandparents, our aunts and uncles, family friends, television, what have you? What models did you have in your life? What models did I have in my life that shaped my thinking pertaining to how I chose to engage in relationships, what I thought was a healthy relationship, and how I'm choosing to engage in my current relationships? So, again, that's something that we're really going to unpack here as she goes through this whole litany of steps and thought provoking items that she is going to communicate here for us to have a better perspective and a better understanding as to what a healthy relationship looks like and what are some practical steps that we can take to make sure that we engage in healthy relationships, cultivate them, and make sure that they are, in fact, sustainable.
We need to teach people how to have healthy relationships. Now, when we typically do so after it's too late. It's called couples therapy. I do couples therapy, and it can be a wonderful thing. But many people come to couples therapy with so many ingrained problems and patterns that they just can't change. It's too late. You know when else we try to teach people how to have healthy relationships? Right before they get married. It's called pre-marital education. And this is a good idea. Teach people how to have a good relationship while they're still happy, presumably. And it can work. But in my opinion, it's still too late. Why? Because people have already selected the person they want to commit their life to.
She makes a strong argument here that even premarital counseling and going to counseling when things are on the rocks, both ends of the spectrum is too late in her opinion. And I find that quite interesting, but I do understand where she is coming from because, from a mental perspective, you have decided to engage in a relationship with someone before you sought wise counsel. And take it a step further, we need to ask ourselves, um, what was it about this person that we decided to ignore the red flags or to ignore the signals? And we'll touch a little bit more on that later, but that there's this one thing that a constant that I run into when I'm providing a counsel with couples or individuals is they will say that the person changed. So here's the question that I posed to them: was it that the person changed, or did you decide to ignore the red flags? And what was your contribution? Not that you were causal to this person potentially changing, but how did you impact and influence their change? And by default, a lot of people will say, well, it wasn't me who changed. It wasn't me who caused them to change. So I will go on the default and say that they were like that in the beginning, but I just chose not to see it. So on both ends of the spectrum, there's responsibility on the individual, whether you like to admit it or not. A self perspective is, did I contribute to the change, or did I ignore the signals in the beginning as this was the person who they were all along, but I chose not to acknowledge it because I was so, in fact, more in love with the idea of being in relationship with them as opposed to actually loving the person that I am in relationship with.
What if they've selected poorly? No amount of premarital education can make up for a bad partner choice. So the ways that we've tried to teach people how to have healthy relationships have been limited because they fail to address three important things: genuinely knowing what you want and need in a partner and a relationship, selecting the right person, and developing and using skills right from the beginning. And I don't mean the beginning of any particular relationship. I mean the beginning, like as soon as possible. We need to teach people, especially young people, how to have healthy relationships. Now, towards this end, my colleagues and I have developed a skills-based model of relationship functioning that we believe can help people create the things that lead to healthy relationships and reduce the behaviors that lead to unhealthy ones. We've identified three skills: insight, mutuality, and emotion regulation, that form the basis for what we call romantic competence. Romantic competence is the ability to function adaptively across all areas or all aspects of the relationship process, from figuring out what you need, to finding the right person, to building a healthy relationship, and to getting out of relationships that are unhealthy. I'll tell you more about the skills in a minute, but first let me say, we didn't just make this up out of the blue. We identified the skills based on a thorough review of theory and research. And the skills really represent the commonalities across the major theories and research findings on healthy relationships.
Again, I just want to point out that I really respect the fact, again, that this is just not a one, two, three, put it together type deal. This is something that they have actually studied, that they've actually researched, from literature review, empirical data, and research, that she is presenting this formula, I would say here, as far as being able to have romantic competency, starting at an early age of developing in young people the right approach, and having the methodology and the tactics and the aptness to be able to engage in healthy relationships from the jump. So bravo to her.
And because they represent the commonalities, we think they really can help people with all the different parts of the relationship process and with all different people, whether people are in a relationship or not. So let me tell you about the skills. The first one is insight. Insight is about awareness and understanding and learning. So with insight, you'll have a better idea of who you are, what you need, what you want, why you do the things you do. So let's say you're being really snappy to your partner. With insight, you might notice or realize that it's not that your partner's doing anything. It's actually that you're really stressed out at work. And what you really need is to relax a little bit so it doesn't bleed out over into your relationship.
And that's one thing that's very important. What we've been talking about, this inward look, not looking at the other person as what they're not doing in the relationship, but taking that self inventory of you, looking at you in the mirror. What's in your backpack? When you said that you decided to go into this relationship, what were the things that you had in your backpack that you came into the relationship with? Was it past hurts? Was it anger? Was it unresolved issues? Was it insecurities? Your desire to feel loved, desire to feel needed, uh, wanting to take care of someone. All these different things, all these triggers that are in our backpacks, and we need to do the work to have the insight on ourselves, to be able to understand what are those characteristics and attributes that we have, and then being able to unpack that backpack to understand why we are the way that we are, and not just resting on this idea of that's just who I am, because quite frankly, when we say that's just who I am, it is an outright abandonment of personal responsibility and accountability to change yourself and expect people to just accept you for who you are, but you want other people to do the work on themselves to accommodate you. So we really need to understand what's in our backpacks, unpack it to figure out what influences shaped us as to why we have those items in our backpacks. Are we just on autopilot when we're packing, when we're going into new relationships? And then when we understand why we are the way that we are, why we're wired, and why we respond the way that we respond and act the way that we act, then we can fully understand and see how we show up in relationships. And once we see how we show up and how we are perceived by other people, then we know how to effectively engage in the relationship. Let's continue.
Insight will also let you know your partner better. Let's say your partner shows up late for a date. With insight, you'll know why. For example, maybe your partner's late for everything. It's nothing about you, it's nothing about the relationship. That's just who your partner is.
Yeah, and I hear this all the time, where people start to interject other people's shortcomings and flaws, things that they're working on, and they personalize it, and make it about them. How dare we do that? We know that the other person is struggling with things, but we tend to try and always find a way to make it about us. And that's just something simply that we just cannot do in relationships if we want them to be healthy. To whereas when we talked about that safe place and safe space, to where the other person can't even be vulnerable enough to share their shortcomings and flaws, without fear of it being thrown back in their faces, or if they do something that it automatically offends you, it automatically offends me. And so we got to be very careful with that, as in not using people's flaws and shortcomings against them, to whereas we want them to open up and communicate so we can work through these things, but then at the same time we're embodying it, we're personalizing it, to whereas the person has no room for failure or mishap, to where we're not showing them any kind of grace or love or mercy. So we got to be very intentional about how we respond, and have that insight to know this is where they are right now. It doesn't necessarily mean that they love me any less. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are intentionally trying to do me harm. It's just something that they have to work through. So as I'm working on myself, they're working on themselves as well. And we have to continue to remember that as we're navigating this thing called relationships.
With insight, you'll be able to anticipate the positive and negative consequences of your behavior. For example, you'll know that if you send that nasty text, it's not going to go well. Maybe you better make a phone call instead. With insight, you'll be able to learn from your mistakes in ways that allow you to behave differently in the future. So maybe you'll recognize that you're the kind of person who tends to jump in really quickly. You get wrapped up in the romance of things, and then things don't go well. So you might be able to say, well, you know what, the next time, I'm just going to take things a little more slowly and not repeat the same mistake.
And here, when we talk about jumping in romantically, again, it's the outward appearance. It may be the clout. It might be the social status. It might be the benefits or the perks of being with someone. And then we're having those blinders on. And we see the red flags. We see the history of this person. But because we're so caught up and infatuated with the idea of a relationship, that we're willing to sacrifice and do anything to engage in the relationship, but we have not dealt with how we packed to come into the relationship. We haven't unpacked why we packed what we packed in our backpack while we're in the relationship. We have not uncovered how we show up in the relationship. Thus, we can't even begin to fathom how to properly engage in the relationship because we have not done the work on ourselves, nor have we taken the time to have that important and hard conversation with the person that we have chosen to be in relationship with.
And with insight, you'll have a better understanding about what's really right for you in a relationship. Maybe you're the kind of person who really needs a monogamous relationship. You're not okay with your partner seeing other people. Or maybe you'll realize it's just the opposite, that you're not ready to settle down and you need a partner who's okay with that. So that's insight. The second skill is mutuality. Mutuality is about knowing that both people have needs and
Yes,
that both sets of needs matter.
absolutely.
With mutuality, you'll be able to convey your own needs in a clear, direct fashion that increases the likelihood that you'll get them met. So let's say you have to go to a really stressful family event and you'd like your partner to be there with you. You might say directly, this is going to be stressful for me. I'd really love for you to be there. You'll be a good buffer for me. Is there any way you can clear your schedule to come with me? With mutuality, you'll be willing to meet your partner's needs as well. Let's say you know that your partner really likes to go to the gym first thing in the morning. It makes your partner feel better the rest of the day. Mutuality will let you be willing to support your partner in this, even though you'd really rather have your partner stay home and in bed with you. And mutuality also lets you factor both people's needs into decisions that you make about your relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you get a great job offer that you'd like to take, but you know it means you're going to have to work more, and you know how important it is for both you and your partner to spend time together. With a mutual approach, you might say, I'd really like to take this job. It's really important to me. But I also am concerned about us spending time together. If I promise to protect some time for us, will you be okay with me taking this job? That's a mutual approach to relationships. The third skill is emotion regulation. And emotion regulation is about regulating your feelings in response to things that happen in your relationship. With emotion regulation, you'll be able to keep your emotions calm and keep things that happen in your relationship in perspective. So you might think, oh my goodness, this is a disaster. This is the worst thing ever. How am I going to handle this? With emotion regulation, you'll think, you know what? I can handle this. This is going to be all right. There's a way to deal with this. I'm going to figure this out. Everything's going to be okay. With emotion regulation, you'll be able to tolerate uncomfortable feelings and not act out on them impulsively. So you'll be able to think through your decisions more clearly. So let's say you're waiting for your partner to text you back. That text isn't coming. You're getting really anxious. You're checking your phone every 2 seconds. With emotion regulation, you'll be able to tell yourself, you know what, calm down. The text is going to come. I don't need to check my phone every second. I'm just going to put it away and focus on the task at hand.
And we're going to end the clip there for today, and then we're going to move into part two next week. But I really want to focus on what she's talking about here as far as the emotional regulation piece. I was talking to a young lady a few years ago who engaged in a new relationship with a young man, and everything was butterflies and daffodils and bunny rabbits in the beginning. Um, but then things took a huge shift when the gentleman started not to operate on her timeline. Uh, the texts weren't being returned in a timely fashion. He hadn't said, I love you. He wasn't giving her the compliments in the timely manner that she desired. And so, needless to say, this put a strain on the relationship from her perspective because he was not communicating in a way that was beneficial to her as to what she needed in the relationship. And it started to frustrate her. Yet my question to her was, have you communicated these things to him about what it is that you need and what you desire in the relationship? And then secondly, it was, Why do you need these validations? What has happened in your past or in your past relationships that these items are still in your bag that you have now showed up into the relationship with? Thus, this is how you engaged with what you have packed, but you have not taken the time to do the work to figure out why it is that you need this type of validation or affirmation from this gentleman. And quite frankly, it's an unrealistic expectation because you have not dealt with the emotions on your own, and you're not dealing in mutuality right now because you're not doing something that's going to be beneficial for the relationship between you and he, and you have not gone as far as getting insight as to your own frame of thinking why you need this type of validation, and you haven't communicated to him and getting his insight as to giving him the opportunity to know where you stand and your expectation as far as wanting these types of responses in a timely manner and how you want it. So again, we have to be very careful in how we approach relationships. If we say we want them to be healthy, it cannot just be one-sided. We can't go into the relationship just expecting everything to go our way without putting the other person's needs uh, at the forefront. Not saying that we put our needs on the back burner, but we need to be intentional in trying to understand the other person as well. So again, under this framework of romantic competency and starting at an early age of understanding how to engage in relationships properly so that they can be healthy and productive. We want to continue this conversation because it's a very critical one. It's a very important one. And again, with this platform, we want to make sure that we are providing great information, sound knowledge, and advice so that we can impact our relationships, thus impacting our homes, our families, thus impacting our community, thus impacting our society, which impacts our nation and will impact globally and universally. So next week we will jump back in on part two of this conversation as we finish unpacking the idea or the theology or the framework of romantic competency, dealing with insight, mutuality, and emotional responsibilities. Until next week, continue to think differently about relationships, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.